Good evening, everybody. Welcome to City Council Committee of the Whole. It is June 24th, about 5:02 or so. Addie, would you call the roll?
Cobb.
Present.
Kuda.
Here.
Petrus.
Here.
Larson. Here. Maddox.
Here.
Russell. Posh.
Here.
All right, I just want to say Davida Russell is excused on vacation. We have a lot on the agenda today, but first on the agenda is the Northeastern Ohio Sewer District Donebrook Restoration Project Design Update. Oh, that's a mouthful. And here's Matt Sharver to kind of lead us through it. Welcome, Matt and company. And we got who on Zoom here?
This is Matt Langing and Glenn Valentine from our consultant team with Simpson. And so they're going to be providing a lot of the presentation, or the majority of the presentation this evening. So thanks to you all this evening for having us out to council to provide an update on our 30% detailed design of the Donebrook Restoration Horseshoe Lake Park project. Cisco Rivera is here with us tonight from the sewer district. He's our watershed team leader representing the city of Cleveland Heights. And then Dennis Saharia is our project manager. So we're here to answer any questions in person, but Glenn through the Zoom feed can do that as well. I just wanted to note later this evening we'll be at Shaker Heights Council giving them the same update. So we want to make sure both cities have these updates before our next public forum, which will be July 15th, which will be a virtual presentation, same information that we'll provide this evening in the evening virtually on the 15th, and then we'll follow that up on the Tuesday with a midday and an evening in-person event for folks to be able to come digest the information and ask us questions directly on the progress of our detailed design. So with that, I'll hand it over to Matt. I know we only have roughly about 30 minutes, so we've got a lot of material to move through, and we would have to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Matt, and good evening, everyone. My first question was going to be, I just want to make sure we know how much time we have, so we'll shoot for that 30-minute target that you just mentioned there, Matt. We do have a lot of content. The first dozen slides or so are really a refresher of the work that we had done previously and presented to you last time we were in front of you in August of 2023. So I'll go over that fairly quickly so that we can spend the most of the time on the new content, which we love your feedback on. And as Matt said, our focus really tonight is to make sure that you have an update and that you are comfortable with the content being presented to the general public in those upcoming public forum meetings in July. Can everyone see the screen okay and hear me just fine?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so like I mentioned, I will go through the first section of the agenda fairly quickly this evening, really focusing on the stream restoration component of the project. And then I'll hand it over to Glenn to talk through the landscape integration or the park integration scope of the project, which is really the city's responsibilities on top of the district funded portion of the project. We'll talk a little bit about the current state of the estimate of probable construction costs and give you a sense of what the next steps are, which is essentially preparing for those July public meetings. To give you a sense of the schedule, on the top of this slide, you can see the pre-design, detailed design, and construction phases of the project. And we're right in the detailed design phase of the project right now. So we're about halfway through the entire process from start to finish. And we've just finished up what we're calling 30% design drawings, which are basically schematic design drawings to make sure that we've got the scope right. And that will launch us into 60% design, 90% design, and then final design through May of 2025. And we'll be ready for bid drawings around that time. Between now and then, we'll have a series of other public forums, likely 3 forums. The next one, of course, being July of this year. Another one likely around December of 24 or January of 25. And then a final forum right around bid time where we will be presenting the work that has gone out to bid at that point. To give you a very abridged summary of the history of the project, as you all are probably familiar, when the emergency breach was cut into the dam, the lake was drained, and the middle branch and the north branch of Donebrook have been slowly carving their way through all all of that sediment to make their way to the emergency breach to continue on downstream. And of course, as you know, the reason for our project is to remove the dam and manage that sediment and then restore the stream corridors in a more final way as part of the leave behind for the project. And so as we started into this schematic design or 30% design phase of the project, one of the pieces of data that we received was a comprehensive tree inventory of the entire property. And this has been incredibly helpful to us, not only because does it tell us all the locations and conditions of the existing trees, but we've started to sift through the data to help inform some of our decision making as we go forward. And to give you a sense of some of those things that we're doing, one of the things that we did was we isolated either the dead trees or the invasive trees on the property, and we identified the locations of all those trees. These are the things that aren't providing a whole lot of value to the project at the moment. And so we're starting to think about how we can adjust our limits of work to make sure that we're managing these invasive species and maybe even manipulating some of our alignments to make sure that we're preserving some of the important trees on the site, which is identified here in this next slide. We're calling these legacy trees. Essentially, what they are trees of good genus or species that are 36-inch in diameter or larger. So these are the big majestic trees on the property, and there's plenty of them. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can do to protect those trees as we go forward in the design process. We've also used the tree inventory to help adjust our alignment, the alignment of our proposed alignments for both the north branch and middle branch of Doan Brook. Here, highlighted in blue, you can see that proposed alignment. And if you look kind of just squint at this, it's almost exactly what you saw when we presented the scheme back to you back in August of last year. The difference is that this is much more fine-tuned to the existing grade and the existing trees on the site. What we didn't share with you last time, because we didn't really have a full picture of it, is what is the extent of earthwork that's going to be required to restore the north and middle branches of Doan Brook through this impoundment area. And so what you can see here highlighted in red is the footprint of all of that regrading that needs to happen to accommodate the stream restoration project. And as you can see, it's pretty substantial. And if I can remind you from last time we talked, the primary reason for that is because there's over 180,000 cubic yards of sediment that have settled behind this earthen embankment that have to move out of the way to enable the stream restoration project. And so we want to take all of that sediment highlighted in these red areas, and we want to make sure that, I'm just going to jump ahead for 1 second here, make sure that we're getting it out of the way of the stream restoration. So we're taking all those red areas, we're harvesting that sediment or that soil, and we're moving it into these orange areas to make way for the new stream alignment. The other thing that we have to do, if I back up here for a second, is remove some trees. And the tree removals that are required are really along the edges of the old lake. And this is also, not coincidentally, but very strategically, also the area where we have a lot of those dead or invasive trees. And so we're trying to be as sensitive as we can to not remove trees that are generally in good health or good condition. We're really fine-tuning our strategy to make sure that we're minimizing the tree removals to trees that are all already providing good benefits to the community. So once we remove those trees, that will allow us to move all this sediment around into these orange areas. And once we do that, that really becomes the basis for the overall park design, where we're making room for the stream restoration to come through the center of the park. And that's really the basis for the function of the park as a part of the urban hydrology. So the form of all that moving the sediment around allows the stream to function as best as we possibly can. And so to illustrate that a little bit, here you can see what we're calling a typical summer rain shower. This is, anything less than an inch of rain in a 24-hour period. And if I toggle back and forth here for a second, what you'll be able to see, just bear with me a second here, is that stream starts to fill up to its banks in a small storm event. And if I keep toggling back and forth here, you can see some little squiggles along the edges of the stream as well. Those are wetlands, and we'll look at those in more detail in just a second. So if this is a typical summer rain shower, if I go ahead, this is what we're calling a one-year storm event. And a one-year storm event just basically means the probability of a storm this size happening in a year. And you can see, if I toggle back and forth between just a typical summer rainstorm and a one-year storm, you can see the footprint of that blue area is quite a bit bigger, and that's strategic. What we're trying to do is get the stream to come out of its banks and access this big, vast floodplain that it hadn't had access to previously. And so you can see that footprint grows in a one-year storm event, and then it grows even more in a 10-year storm event, and it grows even further in a 100-year storm event. This is all by design, and all of that earthwork that we had to do to make way for this to happen is really, the core of this project. It's allowing the stream restoration to happen, and it's allowing the stream to access this vast floodplain throughout the 60-acre park area. The other thing that we're really excited about, which we didn't provide a whole lot of information on last time we were with you because we hadn't really developed the idea yet, is this idea of wetland filters that are intercepting existing storm pipes that are bringing rainwater from the adjacent neighborhoods and outletting that directly into the middle and north branches of Doan Brook today. And that water used to sit in the lake and get overflowed over the dam during storm events. All of that water that was coming in or is coming into the site today is unfiltered water. And these little dashed lines here represent those existing pipes that are sticking out into the park today and letting that stormwater from the adjacent neighborhoods come into the site. What we're proposing to do as part of this project is creating constructed wetlands along the edges of the park where those pipes outlet into the stream to filter that water and allow that water to get cleaned up a little bit before it ultimately makes its way back into Doan Brook. And so these are kind of the lungs of the park that are starting to evolve here. And what's really exciting about it is that it's allowed us to take the park design and the infrastructure design and expand it both into Cleveland Heights and Shaker Heights and take advantage of all the urbanization that has happened and allow the park to provide a service back to the community as part of our design process. And so these wetlands 1, 2, 3, and 4, are all going to provide that function, but we're going to zoom in to this lobe right here, and we're going to look at this in perspective so you can see what it means for the park experience as we go forward. So here you can see, here's that biggest lobe that I was just pointing to, and those other lobes of the wetlands of Wetland 1 are kind of in line here, so you can see them going back into the distance. The middle branch of the Doan Brook is just to the left here, and then the north branch is even further to the left over here. And so what you'll see is that those same storm events that I just showed you in plan view, here's what you can see. Here's how you can see them going through the wetland system in that same order. Here's a typical rain shower. You can see it, what would normally be a dry swale start to get water and convey that water through the wetland system to start doing the filtering of the stormwater runoff before it makes its way. At this point right here, it'll go into a structure and then go back into Doan Brook, having gone through that filtration process of the wetlands. A one-year storm event, you can see the wetlands start to fill up and these little pockets start to fill up with water as well. And then a 10-year storm event, you can see those little pockets start to form little pools and oxbows from that swale. And then the 100-year storm event, you can see the entire footprint of the wetland system is now inundated and will drain slowly over a short duration after a storm event to let all that water have a controlled release back into Doan Brook, because you can see Doan Brook is also pretty full of water at this major 100-year storm event. So we want to control the release of this water back into the brook so that that water in the brook can continue on downstream out to the lake. And so what's exciting about this is now we have two completely separate water systems happening in the park. On the left-hand side of this shared use path is the upstream Doan Brook, conveying water from all of the upstream communities east of us through the park. And then the wetland systems are taking the water from Cleveland Heights and Shaker Heights, slowing that water down, filtering it, allowing the other water from upstream to pass us before it's delivering it back into Doan Brook. This is all by design, and you can see it's going to start to set up our entire park experience as we go forward. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Glenn Valentine to talk through a little bit about what that park experience is starting to shape up to look like.
Thanks, Matt, for that explanation of the hydrology and topography of the park and the management of the sediment. All of that sediment management creates those kind of landforms that Matt was describing. And what that allows us to do is create a wide variety of different habitats within the park. This diagram here shows the kind of key habitats that we'll be creating, starting with the the floodplain down along the restored Doan Brook in that pink color, and then progressing to the constructed wetlands he just gave you some detail on, and then surrounding that you have these gentle sloping hillsides which are going to be maintained as meadow. And then above that, along both South Park and North Park, you have open parklands with lawn and trees and shrubs. And this is a diagram that's very much in process because we're working very closely with both cities and the districts to make sure the amount and the types of landscapes that we design are well within the maintenance capacities of the organizations and the entities that have to maintain them into the future. Now we're going to zoom into each one of these different kind of landscape typologies, the circulation and the amenities. But first we're going to start with just taking a look at what the restored stream corridor will look like on the ground. So this is that circuit trail that goes down the middle of the site, the spine trail. And this is the multi-use path that we've been talking about throughout this process. You can see it's 12 feet wide. There's plenty of room for bikes and for people. And it runs along most of the length restored at Doan Brook. And it's also designed, as Matt had mentioned, to be raised up above the 100-year floodplain so that the water will flow through the park, and this will maintain an access point throughout all of the storm events. Let's jump forward. And that's one way you can engage with the restored Doan Brook is running along the edge on boardwalks and paths. Another way is actual more direct engagement, and this is moving to the north side of the park along the edge of the nature play area. And one of the things we heard most strongly in all of our community engagements was a desire to get close to the brook, to actually engage with the brook. So here you can see, and I didn't mention, these little red arrows give you an idea of where it's a key plan showing where these views are taken from within the park. And here the armoring on the outside of this meander has been transformed into a set of informal steps to allow children and parents to get down and actually engage with the restored Doan Brook. And there's kind of large stepping stones across to form informal bridges across, and then these areas of gravel on the inside bends to allow further engagement and exploration of the restored brook. Thanks. Moving to this central crossing of the park, and this is the bridge that we've been talking about from the beginning. And it's getting closer to a final design. You can see that we've designed it to be incredibly light and open and airy to encourage views both to the east and to the west, with a light railing and a thin structural beam through the middle of it to keep those long views through the park open in all areas. It's also designed to give you a new perspective down on the water. You're going to be looking down on one of the most active areas of Doan Brook, one of the steepest areas, although it will still be quite gentle. You're going to see a lot of movement and activity in that water below the bridge. Now we're going to add one more element of the transformative effect of hydrology with different storm events in the park. The other element that's really key to us is time, and this is the time for the landscape to evolve. This image here we're saying is 1 to 5 years. You can see that it's very low and open with a lot of meadow grasses and small shrubs and trees in the park. But if you advance forward 20 years, you can begin to see what it will look like.
And Glenn, just a note before we jump ahead, I should have noted that the stream restoration process, including the sediment management, the constructed wetlands, and actually this pedestrian bridge and the shared use path, those are all pieces of the district funded portion of the project. And so all of what you've seen so far in this presentation is part of the district project. And we'll make sure that we acknowledge when we shift gears and move more directly into the city's scope of work.
Thanks, Matt. So this is about 20 years down the line, and you can see that we are planning this park to evolve and transform with time. Here you begin to see the shrub layer maturing to a height of maybe 8 to 10 feet in the stream corridor, and the pioneer tree species coming up. We imagine these will be cottonwoods, willows, maybe aspens that grow quite quickly. So after 20 years, they might be 35 feet tall. And you can see how this, in this amount of time, the character of the stream corridor really begins to transform. And if you push it forward another 20 years, it transforms quite a bit again. So here, 40 years into the park, those pioneer tree species are overtopped by the mature hardwoods, which are beginning to close a canopy over the stream corridor. We imagine these being sycamores and shagbark hickories. And they'll begin to shade out that preliminary shrub layer and really reduce the height of that. That will be transformed to a much more herbaceous layer of ferns and other native woodland perennials. And you can see that the bridge running through the middle, really, when you get down to the Doan Brook, will be transformed into a canopy walk, which will allow really interesting interactions with the trees themselves. Here's the landscape integration plan again. And the reason we're jumping back to this is now we're going to zoom into a couple of details about circulation and then take you on a tour through the amenities of the park. And this is the time where, as Matt mentioned, we kind of switch from the program of the district and the management of the restored stream corridor to the amenities that the cities have asked us to design and begin to envision. We're going to start with just looking at the circulation. Based on those landforms that Matt mentioned, the management of the 180,000 cubic yards of material from the lake, we've created these promontories along both the north and the south edges of the park to hold and keep that on site. Those also serve as kind of gentle ramps that allow circulation systems to get from South Park and North Park down into the restored stream corridor and to the park amenities themselves. So these are critical elements for a lot of different reasons, but they really form the backbone of the circulation system and allow that transformative experience of going from high to low and engaging with restored Doan Brook. Thanks. Each one of these major circulation systems, of course, reaches the edge of the park. And as it reaches the edge of the park, we've designed specific park gateways at these critical junctures here with the adjacent neighborhoods. And each one of these gateways is going to have a series of really a suite of elements that will allow visitors to rest and get oriented and enter the park and just be welcomed into the park. There's going to be bike racks and benches, and we'll show you some details of some examples of these park gateways in just a second. Thanks. Here's one of the transformed new gateways, and this is the existing Horseshoe Lake Park entry. And the thing we're really tackling here is creating a sense of a pedestrian arrival. Right now, when you get to, and you can see again with the key plan here on the upper right-hand corner, that view looking into the existing Horseshoe Lake Park. Right now, it feels like a space very much dominated by cars, and there's very little transition between the cars and the park. We're envisioning creating a plaza or paved terrace at the entry to the park with a low mountable curb to really make it clear that the car stops here and parks outside, and the rest of the park is really much more about the character of pedestrians and sort of a promenade through the rest of the park. Thanks. And this is another park gateway. This one is at the intersection of South Park and Attleboro. And here you can begin to see that suite of elements that's going to be characteristic of all areas of the park. You can see masonry piers, 4 or 5 feet high, are going to frame and distinguish these large openings, these welcoming views into the park. And it'll have some of these benches. We're showing them as masonry benches here, but that's still under study. You can see bike racks here, you can see trash and recycling bins here. Those will be standard throughout the park, as well as signage, which will be on these piers and in other locations throughout these gateways. We're also imagining these really as small community gathering spaces adjacent to the park and to the community. So when you use, even if you don't want to go in and engage more with the restored Stream Valley, this will be a very useful resource for the communities just for gathering in these new spaces framed by new shade trees and shrubs. Next. And this is just taking an aerial view of the circulation that I showed you in a diagram just a moment ago, because I know that's quite an abstract diagram, a little bit hard to grasp. We thought that overlaying it over this aerial might help just to show the three major components of the circulation through most of the park. The first one is the spine trail, which ties into the Lakes to Lakes trail at the end of the park. And that's the one I mentioned really runs along the length of the restored brook throughout most of the park. Then there's the mid-park crossing, which is going to be restored with the bridge that I showed you some images of to reconnect the walkway that used to exist across the old dam. And then the other one is this Attleboro-Shelburne Trail. And this is a new connection coming from the two neighborhood gateways and going down into the restored Stream Valley and into the Nature Play, which is the largest of the new amenities in the park. And the next image shows you that these major circulation spines are designed to stay above that 100-year storm that Matt mentioned before, and clearly continue to be ways in and out of the park, even in a major storm event like this.
Glenn, how much longer do you think you have here? Because I want to make sure people have time to ask questions.
We have probably 10 more minutes. Is that going to be all right?
Can you make it 5 so we can get into question and answer?
Yeah.
Thanks.
We'll make it fast. So we're going to run through the amenities very quickly here. These are the amenities. We're going to start from east and move to the west. Next. The first one is the overlook at Shelburne, where this is another one of those community gateways. This is selected because it's the highest point in the park and gives you those long views. It can also be used for community gatherings and informal events. Next. This is an overview of Nature Play. As I mentioned, the largest amenity in the park. It's divided into 3 areas. One on the left is for swings, the middle one is for climbing structures, and the one on the right is for slides. Next. This is a zoom into the center of that Nature Play. It gives you a little bit of the nature and the quality and character of that space, and you can see those climbing structures on the right. On the left, we've taken the old area called the beach and transformed it into a sand play area for the youngest kids using the park. Next. And this is another view from the slide area of the park, and you can see this tree on the left is a major tree that fell recently in the park. We'd like to repurpose as a new climbing structure for the kids. Next. And this is moving further west along South Park Boulevard. This is a big sweeping hillside which surrounds a constructed west wetland that Matt just described. And it really is a strolling garden to experience this meadow landscape. And it also has the pollinator garden, which is this big arcing, colorful garden in the middle, which we've talked to this group about and the community about. We heard that's the appropriate place for it. Next. And this is an overlook arbor. It sits on the landform of the former dam. It overlooks that wetland. It really becomes a key place to watch this very dynamic stormwater feature that Matt was describing earlier as it goes through its transformation with each storm. Next. And this is the sensory garden. This is located down below the historic masonry. You can see in the right-hand side, this arcing, this is the old walls around the Stilling Pool. And we envision this sensory garden as a space with meandering pathways and benches, really with outdoor garden rooms designed to heighten and be particularly tuned to all the senses, both sound, smell, texture, light, and color. Next. This is the outdoor classroom, next to the Beaumont School. It's designed to be 2 spaces, one for kind of council ring for orientation, really designed for younger kids and talking about all the layers of the ecology of the forest. And the other is an outdoor amphitheater with long views into the existing wetlands and mature oak trees, inviting exploration for kids. And the last one. And the last one is a Shaker Interpretive Trail all the way down at Lee Road. You can see the foundations of the 2 historic buildings, the woolen mill and the blacksmith shop here, recalled by using historic stones from the decommissioned part of the dam. We're gonna bring those down here to frame those spaces and explain the function and use them as a showplace for new trees we're planting and talk about how we're transforming the ecology in the rest of the park. I'm gonna hand it back over to Matt very quickly for some costs.
Yeah, I'll make this quick because I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more as well. But this slide just summarizes the district costs and it compares the district costs as they stand right now at our 30% milestone compared to where we projected they might be at the end of our pre-design phase, which was last fall. And you can see the district scope of the project has actually grown in cost. And the primary reason for that is the earthwork. If you kind of look at that delta between the pre-design and 30% design, it's about a $4 million add. And the reason for that is because we now, after having gone through this 30% design process, have a much better understanding through testing and analysis of the limitations of the sediment on the project. There's a lot that we thought we might be able to use that sediment for that we cannot actually use it for structural integrity reasons. And so that has led to an increased series of costs on the district side of the project, which we are now going to explore ways to make that more cost effective. As I jump forward one more slide here, you can see that same comparison for the city's costs. We had in pre-design presented about an $8.5 million total project cost for the cities, which we shared with you back in August of 2023. We actually think that number is trending down a little bit based on the design work that we've done since that point. And so we're feeling pretty encouraged that the costs for the cities as part of this bigger project are in quite good shape, and we're showing an improvement to that total bottom line at this stage. And the last thing I'll just note here is that when you compare the district scope of work on the left-hand side, that's basically the limit of work for the major earthwork on the project. That is essentially the area that the district will be working in. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the city's scope of work. A lot of it falls along the edges of the park, but then it goes down into the stream valley and makes those connections with circulation to some of the other amenities Glenn just mentioned. And so we're feeling really good about where the costs are sitting right now. We've got some work to do to bring those earthwork costs down for the district. But that's essentially the summary that we have for you this evening. I'll end by just noting that we have those public engagement meetings coming up on July 15th and 16th, which we're really excited to provide this update on.
Well, thank you. Very impressive presentation. I see you guys are in the middle of this thing now, and very exciting project. Questions? Councilwoman Larson.
Thank you. I'd like to know if the circulation has been built in so well to this design that you don't expect to have to do periodic sediment removal?
That's a good question. The shared use path, which let me see if I could back up a little bit to a slide that we can point that out for you. The shared use path, which comes diagonally through the site, is also designed for maintenance vehicles, and those maintenance vehicles are going to provide access to the places where we do think sediment is going to build up, whether it's in the wetland systems or in the stream, and we're providing that accessibility for maintenance vehicles to be able to accommodate that. So there won't be anywhere near the level of sediment that is happening in the old lake bed now. But there are some spots in the park which we are strategically designing vehicle access to make sure that they can be maintained both by the district within the stream corridor and the wetlands and by the cities for the park amenities along the way.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilman.
So the Thank you. So the city cost is 7.5 million, and I assume that's shared with Shaker?
That's correct. Yeah, that's the total cost that would be shared between the cities.
And I'm sorry, but I think we're 1/3 of that. Does anybody care to?
65% for Shaker, 35% for Cleveland Heights
Okay.
is what's been discussed.
Keep going.
There's another piece to this with Lower Lake, or is this totally separate from the Lower Lake?
These are two separate projects,
Okay.
same stream corridor, but two separate projects that were underway. And then Lower Lake is about a year or so behind in terms of schedule.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other questions? I would quickly ask, you showed a bridge at one point. What was that bridge, or what is that bridge gonna be made out of?
Yeah, so that bridge, if you can see my cursor, is remaking the connection across the earthen embankment where the emergency breach happened. That bridge is a pedestrian bridge, and the materiality of it, if I can go back to that view, is going to be a steel structure with a wood deck. And you could kind of see it in these views here. It's a little hard to see, but we're showing a wood deck on a steel structure. And we're trying to make that railing as transparent as possible so you can see right through it to get the great views up and downstream. And this will be part of the district scope of work. This is something the district has committed to, rebuilding that connection between the communities.
And what about the path? I couldn't even tell you which path. It wasn't one of the concrete or asphalt paths, and I saw that there were some grass paths, but then there would, maybe that, what's that mean? Same thing?
This would also be a wood boardwalk that crosses the shared use path. This is an image of a district funded piece of the project as well. So that boardwalk would actually be the district responsibility, but there are two other boardwalks a little further afield that would be the responsibility of the communities, and those are embedded in the circulation costs.
And could you kind of define for me what a floodplain is?
Sure, yeah, the floodplain, I'm sure the folks in the room there from the district can give you a more official answer, but the floodplain is basically anywhere where water is going to flow during the 100-year storm event. So this image on the screen here kind of identifies the footprint of that floodplain.
I see. Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you all very much. We really appreciate this, very thorough presentation. And we look forward to, the next 50%. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, appreciate it.
All right. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is go into executive session. So I will ask people not involved in the executive session to step out. We will come back. We have two topics, so I would like to read. I'm sorry. We have three topics then, if we're gonna add, discussing personnel.
Tony, do you want me to stay until Bill gets here for the
Oh.
executive section, or I can step either way?
We can,
There he is. There he is.
yeah. When we're talking about ARPA, we need you, I don't know, are you here for other reasons as well?
No, just ours, but
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna address any of that in
No.
executive session.
I should hope not.
Yeah.
So anyway, you wanna read the first two and then we'll have the other one? Or you can read all three, I guess. Yeah,
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session. A, to consider confidential information related to the marketing plans and specific business strategy of an applicant that is directly related to their request for economic development assistance under ORC sections 3735.67 to .70 or 5709.40 to .43, or that involves public infrastructure improvements directly related to an economic development project. B, to consider the purchase or lease of real property for public purposes, and C, to consider the appointment of a public official.
all right. We need a second.
Okay.
Wanna call the roll?
Cobb.
Aye.
Huda.
Aye.
Petrus.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Maddox.
Aye.
Posh.
Yes.
Okay, we are back from executive session.
This is good to know.
And we're going to go to the next agenda item, which is legislative review. 20 minutes, boy, that's very hopeful, I would say, optimistic. Okay, so we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 for first reading, consideration for adoption. The first one is Resolution 114, resolution authorizing an agreement with Motorola Solutions for 19 dash cam video systems. Any questions on this item? Dash cam, yeah.
I would just point out that it is an approved capital budget item already, so this is what we agreed to when we approved the budget.
Alright. And I spoke with the mayor last night, he'd love to see this happen.
Yes.
Any other questions? 115 is an ordinance authorizing the inclusion of city-owned parcels in the Cedar Lee Special Improvement District. So this is to establish the Cedar Lee SID and include the Flaherty and Collins Development, Inc. Question?
And Mr. President, that's required because while those parcels are ground leased to the Flaherty and Collins entity involved, they're still owned by the city, and under RC 1710.03, city-owned real property is not included in the district of a SID unless there's a written request for it to be included. So this authorizes an agreement that memorializes that request and caps the valuation of the property at $2 million to bring the contribution sort of in line with the rest of the district.
Very good.
Otherwise, it would whack everything out.
Resolution 116 is to adopt the petitions for the SID, the Cedar Lee SID. Yes.
I would like to ask, when you were purveying the businesses and asking them how they felt about the SID, if they wanted to say yes or no, what kind of response were you getting, like a general percentage?
Most of them were okay with it, 'cause
Okay,
most of them were okay. I mean, there was one person that didn't want to sign it, but other than that, I was signatures.
thank you.
117 is a resolution memorializing council's approval of a use variance concerning the property at 1774 Lee Road. That's the one we heard in the public hearing. So assume there's no questions about that. So then we go to first readings only. We have for first reading an appointment of Sam Bell to the Transportation and Mobility Committee. 111 is a resolution confirming Mayor's appointment of Carly Beck to the Climate and Environmental Sustainability Committee. 112 is a resolution confirming Mohammed Irfan as a member of the Climate and Environmental Sustainability Committee. And 113 is to confirm Sean Terry. So those are the first readings. Second readings. Actually, I think the first two, 101 and then 107, are for the Sal Russo property at Cedar Grandview. The first is for a $340,000 loan. And the second is for the parking lot behind Firestone, and that would be at a cost of $660,000. Any discussion on this? Yes.
I would like you to state that where the expected the funds are to come from to make these two pieces of legislation work.
Yeah, well, I guess while the finance director is not here this evening, you've essentially identified that the general fund and the unappropriated funds is where the fund for this would come from.
Thank you.
Ordinance 102 is a ordinance that would, the first one's for the Climate and Environmental Sustainability Committee that would have all appointments done by council. Same for ordinance 103 with the Transportation and Mobility Committee. Ordinance 104 is a resolution appointing an assessment equalization board to hear objections relative to the estimated assessments for a portion of the expense of street lighting within the city of Cleveland Heights. Mr. Law Director, are those people in the legislation? I'm sorry, I forgot, I don't have.
Yes,
Okay,
they are.
all right,
And they are residents of the county but not the city because these two assessments include all the property in the city.
got it. Resolution 105, same thing, appointing an assessment equalization board to hear objections. And this kind of enumerates what they could be: streets and parkways, grading, draining, curbing, paving, repaving, repairing, sweeping, or cleaning, snow removal, planting, maintaining, shade trees, et cetera. Any questions about that? Okay, resolution number 1006 is a resolution allocating $7,500 to Future Heights for the Music Hop, which is in late September. Any questions about that? A lot of these we discussed when they were for first reading. Resolution 108. This is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Protect a Coat, Inc. to make public improvement of the Compton Road Pocket Park pathway using ARPA funds. Yeah. Resolution number 109. This is an agreement with various nonprofit entities for ARPA funds. I think I might have had a couple of questions about this.
There's some changes on
So why don't we take a minute and take a look at these changes?
Bill, you can correct.
So Mr. Law Director, I see that the amounts haven't changed. Is there anything in here that, I just read it.
I think it's just tightening up the language authorizing the mayor to execute.
All right,
I actually think there may be a typo in the amended ordinance though,
Oh, no.
resolution I should say. I think it should say to enter into grant agreements in the same or substantially similar form, not in the same amount or substantially similar
Oh, in the same form.
form. The third line.
Okay, of the contracts that are involved in this particular piece of legislation, is there any nonprofit or program getting anything less than the allocation that was initially proposed?
No, not under the contracts, but there is, because of the working capital advance basis, payments are being made to them. The award, receiving the full award is contingent upon continued compliance with the
Sure.
monitoring and reporting, so
Understood,
that's why it's a not to exceed.
got it. Please.
If approved tonight, this legislation will allow the mayor to go out and get those contracts signed with the nonprofits.
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of I'm talking timeline again, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I'm sorry, what kind of timeline are we looking at for the contracts to be signed and then people to start to see their 25% or whatever it is they're gonna get as initial payment?
That is one reason why it would be great if Tara were here right now, but we are going to do everything we can to get as much out the door this week as we can. Without Tara here, I don't know what limitations are on that timeline, but we will, upon the passage of the legislation, we can go out, start getting signatures and start processing through files.
Chris and Mr. President, if I might, just to add to that, because I did have an opportunity to talk with the finance director late last week. Assuming this is adopted tonight and assuming the agreements are all executed like by Wednesday-ish, maybe Thursday morning, her expectation was that she could issue the initial payments on Friday the 28th. So that's the working goal. It does depend upon executed contracts and of course other things falling into place.
Okay.
But she felt that that was doable.
Councilman Petrus, there was an email I think you were involved in that, does that sound like the date that?
Yeah, that's what the law
All
director
right,
said.
yeah, I just read a lot of emails, so I wasn't sure if that was the one on that topic. All right, any other questions about that?
So do we need to amend by substitution?
Yes.
Yes, I actually have the wording here. Is it okay if I do it just because I wrote it down? Okay.
I mean, typically sorry to interrupt, typically the presiding officer doesn't, but it's
I mean,
not.
I could give it to somebody.
It's up to you.
Okay. No Cobb sits next to me, so
Can I read your writing?
we'll
I can
find out.
email it to you.
We'll find out. And then fifth reading, ordinance number 077, ordinance approving the application filed by the mayor and authorizing the establishment of a designated outdoor refreshment area. Questions? Okay.
So I took a look at the safety plan that the mayor shared with us. I noticed that there weren't any provisions for pedestrian or cyclist safety measures in there. And so, like I said previously, I would support us potentially allocating some funds to ensure that there are some things that will physically slow cars down. Again, I'm not looking to slow down the legislation that's before us.
Just the cars.
Right, exactly. So this would be separate, but in addition to the DORA legislation that we have before us. So I guess, is there interest among other council members in trying to provide for that sort of fund? Council President?
Yes. Any other questions? I know I have a couple. Go ahead.
So if I
sorry.
could, so Mr. Law Director, should I make a motion to direct the law department to drop legislation so that we can allocate those funds, or what would be the best approach?
I don't think that makes sense right now,
Okay.
but I'm thinking that when you return from recess in August, that window of time will provide an opportunity to talk with Public Works and with other stakeholders who can help decide like what that, I have no
What the
idea if
amount
that's $5,000. I'm sure it's not, or
Right now,
500,000. So I think finding out what the projects are and what they might cost would then allow you to
Okay.
do that.
This is related.
No, go ahead.
We have a safety committee meeting on tomorrow night at 4:00. On the agenda is the DORA safety plan. Maybe the path to take is to take your ideas and use that opportunity to work with staff on what it's gonna take to get some tables. It was my understanding from talking to one of my peers, honest to God, I forget which one of you it was, but there was some work apparently done out of the, I believe, the planning department possibly, that they were looking at Lee Road and some safety issues. Maybe I'm off with that, but I do believe that Lee Road safety has gotta be noodled on by our staff. And let's try to make a commitment that we're gonna resolve this. I mean, I don't wanna hold up the door, obviously, we wanna hold up the traffic, but maybe we can make a commitment amongst ourselves to get that resolved in the next 30 days.
Okay.
Other,
Yeah, I would be committed to that as well. I think it'd be a good idea for us to get legislation started because Lee Road is David Eisler in my mind and Sophia Villanueva were killed last year on that road. I wanna make sure that we're committed as a council to following up and putting in traffic calming equipment, that we're going to be, I would like to get the report, because the legislation requires that the mayor and the chief of police meet on a monthly basis the first 90 days. I would like to ask that council receive a report from those meetings as they go through the first 90 days, and I'd also like to know that the Lee Road is a high priority on the comprehensive and equitable safety action plan, which is being worked on right now by the administration. So there are things that we can get information on, and we just have to figure out the best tool to use for that. But I will not hold up the vote either.
Councilman Maddox?
So since we're talking about these plans, we're talking about Lee Road, is the expectation that some of you guys are gonna come in here in July so we can do something and start this process? Otherwise, we're not gonna touch anything until August. So I guess I wanna know where we are with that, because we just did a whole lot of sense of urgency, but we're not here for an entire month. So what do we wanna do?
I mean, I can just speak for myself. I would attend such a meeting. Anybody else?
I'm here.
I can be dependent.
Yeah, we'll probably do a doodle poll and figure that out.
I'm here, but I think what's critical is that we do reach out to staff in the administration and explain what the problem is and give them a little bit of breathing time to come up with some solutions, hopefully solutions that are already on the drawing board. Understanding that this is one of our priorities, and the first part, I don't know how long that's gonna take, to be honest with you. I don't direct staff. But if we can give them a reasonable amount of time, and my expectation would be 30 days or less before we meet again, which would then bring us right into August. But if we do need to meet sooner than that, or maybe if there needs to be a small subgroup of us that need to be meeting with staff to try to make the process run quicker, we can be prepared for something, hopefully in August.
Council
President. Mr. Law Director, is it possible, rather than waiting until we get back and then starting to draft legislation, is it possible for us to start working on something now so that it's ready whenever we get back? And then the staff could drop in the numbers for the estimates that they think that some of these things might cost, so that as soon as we get back, we're able to vote on it?
Probably. And I say that only because I'm not exactly sure what you're proposing. I guess I don't want it to sound like I'm talking in circles more than usual, but if Public Works and Planning, for example, have identified or identify relatively quickly some projects that seem useful in terms of increasing safety and slowing traffic and for pedestrians, bicyclists, et cetera, and there's an interest in moving forward, at that point it becomes a question of contracting. And I think the background question then is budgeting rather than sort of a, allocation can be sort of for show, like we're allocating some money for this, but it needs to be budgeted and then, expended for a contract with somebody who's gonna actually effectuate those changes.
So you're
so the legislation itself shouldn't actually take a lot of time. I think it's the work on designing and determining what makes sense that'll probably take more time. And
so in your judgment, it's okay to wait until we get back in August, that shouldn't delay us
correct
in passing something?
I think that's right, yes.
I'm just gonna state, I think it would have been inappropriate anyway, because he's gonna bring this in the committee, so anything that we would have been asking to develop that legislation should have been produced from the conversations that we're having in committee with the administrative staff. That's putting the cart before the horse. We're asking him to write something up before we even started that process. So I think whatever happens needs to be produced from those conversations in that committee over that 30 days before we initiate any type of legislation, because we're gonna wanna hear exactly what processes we can have, what things can be put in place and what makes sense there. And I think in order to draft legislation, you wanna iron all that out first. And so I'd like to see anything that's produced would have to happen after the safety, committee, when those discussions are happening and the administration's coming in. Otherwise, I think he'd be working backwards from that process.
So I think these are great voices. I just want to remind everybody that the meeting's at 4:00 tomorrow. It would be great if I could hear all your voices tomorrow, but I understand it's during the day. Not everybody can make it.
Thank you for the invite. Any other, Dora? Oh, yes.
If I may, I just wanted to point out, while the discussion is being had, that we do have Destiny Burns in the room from CLE Urban Winery. She was really one of the key people that we worked with and advocated for bringing this forward. So I know she intended to give public comment today in support of the DORA, but I don't know if any of you had questions for her, sort of on behalf of the merchant, or if you wanted to afford her an opportunity to say anything in support of the DORA at this.
Go ahead.
Destiny, as a merchant representing the merchants of Lee Road, does what we're talking about here for traffic calming make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. My concern is conflating the two. So I think taking this off into the safety committee and doing that as a different but related issue is fantastic. Maintenance as well.
Thank
You know, the road could be better maintained as well, but it's not tied to the DORA itself. I definitely support, and we all support making the road safer. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I wanna just say that every conversation I've had with Destiny and Adam and the people that are involved in this, they all did sign on to all the merchants signed on to this that were involved in the DORA that serve alcohol. They all wanted to say, let's do it right.
Yes, I do just want to mention that Chief Britton is kind of on hold pattern. If you guys do want to ask him questions during the council meeting, he will be on Zoom if you do wish to ask questions. So do you think you're going to have questions for him? Would you like to hear from him?
I'd like to hear from him. And I did speak with the mayor about foot patrol and crosswalk safety and traffic calming, and he's on board with all of that. I had a question about page 128.
In the packet.
In the packet, yes. Where it says, there's like 5 enumerated in accordance with 4301.82 of the code. It's number 3 says, no person shall enter the premises of an establishment within the DORA while possessing an official cup of beer, wine, or intoxicating liquor acquired elsewhere. So I guess my question is, why, if a merchant, is this the law, or could a merchant who doesn't serve beer or alcohol, like for instance, I don't know, let's just say there was a Subway, I'll make it hypothetical. That's a no-go. You can't bring alcohol into an establishment that doesn't serve alcohol.
I can answer that.
Yes.
My understanding is it'll be up to the individual businesses, and there will be stickers at the door identifying whether or not that business allows it to come in.
Well, if that's the case, Mr. Law Director, what about this wording I'm talking about? No person shall enter the premises of an establishment within the DORA. I mean, that sounds like everybody.
Yeah, I would agree.
So,
So,
go ahead. Bill.
if I might, and I'm sitting here looking at Columbus's application, perhaps it would be better to change that to prohibit the entry. So what they have, no person shall do any of the following. Enter the premises of a non-permit holder establishment that does not allow DORA beverages.
Yes, that's much more clear.
To make it clearer than that, I think the intention of that was to prohibit people from going into one permit holder with a DORA cup into another. Did that make any sense, what I just said there?
That sounds like that's what this says.
Well, that's the intent of it. I mean, it's sort of ambiguous, and I think it was clear that
He means liquor permit.
No, I understood, yeah.
Okay.
What was the Columbus language?
in accordance with those sections, no person shall do any of the following. Enter the premises of a non-permit holder establishment that does not allow DORA beverages. So for example, if you wanted to go into Mitchell's or any of the other businesses on Lee Road that don't have a permit, you could carry your DORA cup in there if the business permitted it. you cannot go from one DORA permit holder into another. So in other words, you couldn't take your DORA cup from Tavco and go into Heights Grill with it.
It's a discarded, right?
Yes.
But you
So
could,
what's the change that you wanna make then?
kind of what Destiny said, that you
have
could,
there, a copy of it.
yeah.
So we would change number 3 in this application, where it says no person shall enter the premises of an establishment within the door while possessing an official cup of beer. That should, no person shall enter the premises of a non-permit holder establishment that does not allow DORA beverages.
So then if this comes out and that amended language goes in, going into a permit holder establishment with a beverage in an official cup would be permitted.
At the discretion of that business.
Yes, so, yeah, and this doesn't make, currently, it doesn't make any distinction, although I think it was the intention to allow that to happen.
Yes, it was.
I can't tell.
It says the opposite, so we should get that cleared up.
Yeah. Thank you for catching that, I guess.
Well, actually, Council President brought that to my attention earlier, and I'm like, well, I think that's not what we intended, but I could see how you read it like that. So, how do we amend this application? Or can we approve it and have the mayor make the change? Or are we approving the application subject to? Can we make an amendment to approve the application subject to that change?
Let's look at the legislation, but I also want to come back to the specific intent of the language that you're proposing. Yeah, it says that this is the acceptance of the application as submitted attached here too. So it needs to be changed if that's the intention. So you want to change this to say no person shall enter the premises of a
Non-permit holder establishment that does not allow DORA beverages.
within the DORA while possessing an official cup of beer, wine, or intoxicating liquor required elsewhere.
Well, that's the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, we could, no person shall enter the
I mean, if it's,
premises
you can get
of
rid of
a.
acquired elsewhere if it's.
Well, all we need to do is put in, no person shall enter the premises of a non-permit holder establishment. Stick that in.
Well,
Am I
unless,
right on this?
but did Destiny indicate that some non-permit holder establishments might want to allow it?
I think they would, but some may not, so it's gonna be at their discretion, that was my understanding. There'll be a sticker on the door that will indicate whether they're allowed to come in or not, whether they're a permit holder or not. Everybody would be very clear about that.
I think that would be,
So no person shall enter the premises of a non-permit holder establishment, that does not allow DORA beverages, or within the DORA that does not allow DORA beverages.
it just seems to me that it should say
It's a little redundant.
at the
We don't need to
discretion of the, like, I just, instead of all that mumbo jumbo, I'm sorry, just, that you could enter at the discretion of the owner of the establishment.
Well, I think there has to be a rule though. You don't want the owner saying you can come in.
I mean, but it's,
That they can have a discretionary rule.
yes, rule, yeah, not
So that's what.
not discretionary on the person.
Right, so that does not allow DORA beverages.
Yes, you're leaving it up to the person. We're making it more complicated than it needs to be. No person shall enter the premises of a non-permit holder establishment that does not allow DORA beverages.
And I would leave in within the DORA.
Well,
I mean,
you can't leave the DORA,
I
so that's
understand.
not really necessary.
Well, and then we need while possessing an official cup of beer, wine, or intoxicating liquor. Because that's what they're prohibited from doing. I mean, they can enter.
Right.
They just can't enter with a beverage. I don't know what time you guys talked, but this would have been great about 6 hours ago. So I can work on this for a moment, and Councilman Cobb, do you want me to give you text then, and if you want to propose an amendment? Strong your glasses.
Did anybody else have any
Tiny.
Dora questions? Because we're kind of up against it, I'm fine with them. So on the agenda, it says, looking ahead, 2025 budget. Well, we don't have 20 minutes to talk about this. I just want to encourage everybody to send Addie any ideas you have, whether it be wish list or things that you think need to be in the 2025 budget, because when we come back, we'll be in the beginnings of the budget process. And I would like to, in August, first meeting, just kind of get a timeline together for our participation in that budget process so that we're a little ahead of the curve. Under other, I have one topic that I would like to just discuss really quickly. I asked Councilman Petrus to chair a kind of select committee that would be for oversight of the ARPA funds and our process in the ARPA funds. And I asked Councilwoman Gail Larson and Councilman Craig Cobb to serve on this. The purpose of the committee is threefold. First of all, to do oversight, general oversight on what's going on with ARPA. We're getting emails every Friday now. We started, the first one was fantastic and detailed and had a lot of information in it. But sometimes, there's the more information you get, the more sometimes questions we have. So that's one. The second is to kind of discuss any allocations or reallocations, because we don't know if every single penny that we've allocated is indeed going to go towards exactly what we said. Things can happen, sometimes unforeseen things can happen. And the last thing is, and this is something Councilman Cobb talked about, to add as a charge to this committee, to collaborate with the administration and the law department on programming specifically for ARPA funds that the administration is going to be overseeing. Things like the Community Investment Fund, their exterior repair program, those kind of things. Things that are not going out to nonprofits, but still are going to be done. So this way so we're not gonna pass anything, but I just wanna know if there are any questions about this. I'd like to move forward with it, as soon as possible. And this committee would dissolve, obviously, at the end of the year when.
Why are we using the existing finance committee for this?
We could use an existing committee, but I'm just thinking, that there's all kinds of things with finance that go on. Or move it into budget season. This would be specifically for ARPA funds. I think, in my view, it needs special kind of attention.
How did you make the selection process for this committee?
I just asked Councilman Petrus.
It's not because
You asked if I would.
Yeah.
How'd you make the other, there's
I asked the people if they were interested in serving.
interest?
Yeah.
I guess we can have further conversation about it. I'm a little uncomfortable with that. I've got some issues with it. I would like to see what that oversight is and what that looks like. I have my own conversation with the administration about ARPA, and I want to make sure that all 7 members of this council are getting the same information. And it appears like things are getting siloed, and you're just recycling the same people over. So I'd like to see specifically why, but I would suggest that you leave it in finance. That's just me.
Understood. But this would be anything but siloed. It's, it's the whole idea is to
It's just interesting because it's the first time I've heard of it and I've been touching ARPA.
it's the first time I thought of it.
This is the first time no, it isn't because you've already called him. It's just interesting because I've been touching ARPA since the beginning of the process. And it's the first time I've heard about anything extra that we're doing. So it seems pretty siloed to me, considering the partnership and the community engagement of this process. So if any changes are coming out of that committee, I'd like to know. But in the future, I think if you're gonna do something like that, I think you should suggest that and bring it to the table with all of us here. It's problematic for me to keep hearing that the side conversations are happening outside of this room. It's happening more and more.
Well,
And I'm uncomfortable with the fact that at least 4 people in this room already knew, which is a majority of council, that this was happening. And I know that for a fact. So that's problematic. So in the future, as president of this council, my expectation is if you're gonna create a committee, add any assignments, all of those decisions need to be made at this table in the light of day in front of the public.
and that's what I'm doing now.
You
I'm saying-
already made the decision.
I didn't make any-
The discussion and any selection process and that criteria needs to also be public.
No decision has been made.
You just made it and you listed everybody in the committee.
I said, this is what I'd like to do. I would love to hear a discussion about it.
Well, I look forward to that
And
future.
as a matter of fact, I actually brought this up to Councilman Cobb some months ago. And, you know,
And
I
nothing to do,
didn't,
again, shouldn't change anything I said. We need to
Yeah.
have those conversations publicly and in the light of this table, but I do find it strange that the finance committee didn't touch that at all.
any other comments about this? Because I really would like to move forward with it. I think it's important that we give this a very special attention.
Then you know what? I'm gonna volunteer to be on that committee then. Is that a problem for you, Mr. President?
It's not a problem.
Absolutely. Add me as an official member of that committee.
But what I wanna know is, does everybody agree that we need a committee to do this work?
If we do,
That's the thing I'm the most interested in.
right there.
The work has to get done. And I mean, I think that the first update we got from Guidehouse was very good.
Yeah.
I was gonna say some things tonight, and I'm really not prepared to say it right now about Guidehouse and the investments and, I mean, I don't believe I was on this when the June meeting happened, when we got an update from finance, but it seems like there's a lot of things that are still unencumbered. I'm worried we're gonna lose the funding.
Yeah, it's just my view that we really need to focus on this and we can't do it. And I mean, look at this, we can't do everything in committee of the whole. Yeah, I would love to, but we can't, you know. Any other,
Well, I wanna make sure though, it's not I wanna know who's responsible, who's accountable for getting these things encumbered, okay? I mean, you know, what I was gonna say is, you know, these are COVID relief funds that were to help for COVID relief. COVID's 4 years old now.
Yeah.
And the bulk of this money has not been earmarked yet. I mean, except for the sewer stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, and you know, just sort of seeing us trying to get the information from the nonprofits and hearing the frustration, no anger from the nonprofits. I mean, we can't go through more and more of this. I know you need to go to this. I know we need to have our meeting,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think we all need more time to make sure that this is gonna get done and get done right. And, you know, I do trust my peers in whatever committee, you know, gets made to help fix this. I mean, I think it's a huge it should be a huge priority of ours, because something just doesn't seem right.
yeah. And I think it needs special attention. Anyway, all right, so if there's no
Chair
objections,
of that committee.
pardon?
Who's the chair?
I asked Jim Petrus if he would chair the committee.
Okay. You asked him and you talked to Councilwoman Larson and Councilman Cobb.
With the understanding
Were
that
there
it
any
wasn't
other-
set in stone,
Any other council people you had this conversation with?
No.
Positive?
positive.
Okay.
Yeah,
In the future, I would
this was
like
just about bringing it to the table
That's
today.
fine. I would like fully to be brought to the table, not any decisions made. I just would like you to lead with more transparency.
Just so you know, when I come here and I say I have an idea, it's an idea, and this is how I'd like it to happen. But maybe, I'm very aware that maybe the majority of council may not want it to happen that way. And then we'll just settle that right here.
Nothing seems to be settled here. There seem to be side door conversations. By the time it comes here, I'm watching votes take place. I'm not saying very much discussion is what I'm saying. So I would like you to lead with more transparency. That's all I'm saying.
Try to be as transparent as I can.
when you made the first committee selections, there was no transparency.
This is what,
When you
it's an
became
ask.
council president, it was pushed through.
I understand.
This legislation we're about to pass in the other room, boom, pushed through, no discussion. So again, I need more transparency on behalf of the entire public so that you're hearing me. I need you to walk in integrity when you come in this room and stop the sad backdoor conversations with individual council members. I need real transparency at this table. The game stopped.
Okay, just so you understand.
I don't need to understand. I'm
Well,
telling you, I need
I'm
transparency.
gonna say my piece.
I need transparency.
I hear you.
What you gotta
Okay.
do, Mr. President?
Right now, I'm gonna end this conversation with one thing.
Please and thank you.
That the previous council president, and I would assume all council presidents, picked up the phone and called people all the time. This is nothing unusual.
It is when you
And
call
you're
for
not
it.
recognized right now. This is nothing
I'm
unusual.
never recognized.
This is nothing unusual. And I have no expectation that because I have an idea that it's definitely gonna happen. So we're gonna go we're gonna adjourn this meeting at 7:17 and go to our special meeting in the other room. This meeting is adjourned.